right, welcome back to another week from the bench. We are excited for this week simply because we have two people aspiring to be great in this business. In the past weeks, we've heard some from veteran coaches, but now it's our turn to kind of dig deep in terms of what are the concerns that young aspiring coaches have. But at the same time, for and I'll speak for myself, the older generation to really dive in and get deep with where are they coming from? Why are they wanting to get into it? And we're very lucky to have Ashton Pilz and Konner Beste with us, who both have been, I think, leading the charge during this coronavirus and during this time that we're all home. So let me start it off. Ashton, why don't you kick it off? Konner, you can follow her in terms of, tell us a little bit of your story. Tell us why you're wanting to get into coaching, your current role, and where you want to go with this.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for this opportunity. Just kind of where I'm at currently, I'm a student manager at the University of Kansas for the men's basketball team. I just finished my first season with the team, so it was a great first rookie season. But before this, leading up, I guess part of my story, I played collegiate basketball at the NAIA level. So I got a scholarship out of high school to play. The first week I get on campus, then during tryouts, and I injure my spine, break my L4 and L5, and I'm out for the entire year. Had spine surgery, so I didn't have my team role wasn't on the court. I wasn't impacting the team with my playing ability. So I really had to find my voice and my role outside of the court. So that's what kind of led me. I always knew I wanted to be a coach, but I was like, okay, I'm injured. How am I impacting the team? And it just kind of spiraled from there. So during the summers, NAIA, we don't have any workouts. We're not staying on campus. So I filled my summers with working camps. I was getting healed, finished my red shirt, was playing really well over the summer, going to all these camps, going to the Final Four, meeting different people, trying to, build those relationships. And, sophomore season comes around, get injured again. I set out the rest of that semester. So I think that a big part of my story was getting injured, because that really propelled, I guess, my ambitions of trying to coach, because my coaches let me recruit for them. They were letting me, work on social media stuff for them. I was having a voice, telling our team, what we could be doing better, since I wasn't, having that role on the court. So I thought that was really cool. Every coach I had that I played for wanted me to be the best aspiring coach that I could be, the best student athlete I could be. So, I was saving every practice outline. I have binders and binders of all the practice outlines from my playing days. So this past spring, I was at Missouri Baptist, and I was, playing. I got healthy and, working the camp tour. I went to the Final Four. I met Konner there, ended up working his camp at Queens in July, and, was working all these camps. And then just kind of started getting some calls from different coaches hey, have you ever thought about wanting to be a manager? I didn't know managers, that was an opportunity. I didn't know that. So I started hearing more and more about it. And I was like, maybe I could go be a manager at another school. And so I think the University of Kansas is an incredible school and an even better coaching staff and team and program. So I just kind of took a leap of faith and went to work their camp. And then, the last day of camp was hey, I think I want to be a manager. I really want to be a coach. I think this is a great program to learn from. And just kind of went through that evaluation progress in that evaluation period, and got offered the job in into July. And moved up to Lawrence 7-8 days later. So it was a very quick transition. I had to decide between, do I want to keep playing, or do I want to, give up my playing days to continue to follow my dreams of being a coach? And for me, it was really important to take this leap of faith. And so I'm glad I did. And that's kind of how I got to KU, my route. It's very interesting. I transferred a couple times. I've done that, been the new kid, halfway through the semester. But I think that my role currently as a student manager, I've grown a lot the last 9 months. So I'm really glad I took the leap of faith. I'm really thankful. I got the experience as a player, but now, from the bench as a student manager, I'm learning even more. So that's kind of part of my journey.
I love the plug. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's great. Konner, how about you?
So for me, I kind of say that coaching found me And you know, it wasn't like when I have some story like, oh, I was 7 years old and I just knew I wanted to coach. I just kind of always been around sports and basketball. I actually used to be the ball boy at SDSU for from age 8 to 14 or something like that, from the men's and women's program. But my mom's a teacher, and in our school district, you have to be, you know, an employee of the district to coach. And so I'm like, I don't want to be a teacher. So I just never really thought of coaching. And then, I went to Nebraska, Lincoln, my first year, and put my textbooks on my student ID card. And then I got the bill later, and I'm like, oh, I need a job. Looked at the website, on campus listed job, student managers for the women's basketball program. And so I started doing that, and it just kind of opened my eyes to the whole, you know, actually coaching at the college level. And probably one of the big, the big, you know, role models for me that year was Shimmy Gray Miller was at Nebraska. And, you know, just her presence and, you know, how she inspires and motivates, and the example she set was you know, really inspiring to me. You know, and I even felt that as a student manager. And I think I've always been interested in you know, progression or kind of optimizing whatever skill or you're doing. And then I just, you know, it was kind of these two different pieces, you know, discovering the college game, seeing someone like Shimmy, and then, you know, still that interest. And I'm like, well, I love basketball and this looks great. So, and it's funny too, because the whole reason I went to Nebraska was because I was going to major in accounting. It was a big school. Basically, I was going to network in the way people shouldn't network. And I was just going to meet all these people, be an accountant, make a ton of money. Life was going to be good. And then, so it was just kind of you know, I didn't do well in school, you know, and then it's oh, Nebraska kind of costs a lot of money out of state. So I transferred, and I went to the University of South Dakota. Being from Brookings, they're our rivals, so I wanted nothing to do with athletics there. And then it was that year of being removed from it, where I was yes, this is, you know, I'm in my accounting class and everybody has March Madness on and we're in accounting. And I'm like, okay, well, in the real world, accountants would be doing tax season right now. And I'm like, so tax season or basketball? And I'm like, so I transferred to South Dakota State. And, you know, from being around the program as a ball boy and stuff like that, I emailed Coach Johnston, and then I was a student manager at South Dakota State for the women's program for 4 years. And then for a little bit there, I was like, oh, maybe I want to see what the men's side is like. And so for my last 2 years, I also worked as a student manager for the men's team. And then I learned that I wanted to stay on the women's side. And then after that, I graduated last summer. And then I got a job as an assistant coach at Queen's University of Charlotte. And I was there this last year. And then I'm not there currently anymore. So then now where I'm at now is just kind of a free agent, and just kind of trying to make the most of this time, just trying to, you know, reflect on all my experiences, and you know, focusing on what I can control, and just trying to get better, you know, until I figure out what my next step will be.
I love hearing your guys' story. You know, I think the big takeaway from both of you that you already have in your DNA that I would want people to hear what you guys have said is that you're pretty much willing to go anywhere and do anything. And I think that's an important trait that all prospective coaches should have. And that is not to be taken lightly. I think that's a really important part of both of your stories that you guys should really lean into, and realize that it's probably going to happen a few more times to ultimately be where you want. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Okay. I know our head coach at Point Loma, that is her first question that she asks back to prospective coaches about. She says, well, where are you willing to go to do this job? And I think both of you should really lean into that point and live in that space that you're doing the right things. Everything that you've done and taking risks and chances and chasing a camp job or chasing a job that doesn't look like it should follow the path, the trajectory of the normal thing. I really, really want to just let you both know that that's an important part of both your stories and your journey. And it's probably going to happen a few more times. And you have to be willing and able to, if you watch back some of the stories, B-Row throws everything in his truck and leaves San Diego. Like, are you kidding me? Like, that should be the pinnacle, right? Like, he shouldn't be leaving San Diego. But, to go back east and create more experiences and more people that know him, and before I throw it over to Tony, just the last thing really just is really just leaning into starting, Konner, you mentioned Shimmy, start to be able to have more names on that list for both of you. You've now been a lot of different places, and they may not be glamour names that everyone in the country knows who they are. Like Shimmy, obviously everyone knows that name, but I guarantee you, Aaron, obviously everybody knows that name, but it's like, there's names that you guys, each of you have, that you want those people to speak of you in their circle. And that's really kind of leaving you that. And you have that depth because you've both been to so many different spots and places. So that would be really my two takeaways in hearing both your stories. That I just want to great job, lean into it, keep going with that. And you're off to the right start just because of those risks and those paths. So I'll throw it over to Tony and let him kind of just take it to the next step. But just really, really appreciate you sharing that for both of you. Thank you.
Yeah, both stories, great stories. I mean, it's the interesting part of this game is that everybody starts somewhere, right? You start with something. Something got you into it, regardless of what it was. Ashton, I can identify with you a little bit. I got hurt my senior year of high school, and that kind of helped propel me into the whole idea of coaching. And then Konner as well is just, throwing yourself into being a manager. I think when you do those things, you add value, right? You're adding value in one way or another, whether it's, cleaning the floors, getting the balls out, whatever it is, you need to add value. And that's a concept that you need to keep with you as you stay in the business, right? Adding value to whatever program that you're involved with, or, going towards next. And obviously, being in one place for a long time is a good thing to show, some loyalty and some stability, but it's not the end all be all, because you do need to have varied experiences to learn more. Then the other thing that we were talking about, Jesse was talking about names a little bit, your circle, right? Your close circle. Like these guys that we're doing this show with, this is part of my close circle, so you have that close circle of people that you need to keep close to you so you can bounce ideas off of. Vent when it's necessary. Any of the things that you need to keep kind of close to you, those are the people that you need to make sure that you keep with you. So I guess that's going to lead kind of my question to you now is that in your processes, probably for both of you. So Ashton, start with you. Like now you spent time as a player. Now you're a manager. I mean, obviously you've got a little more time left before you finish. I mean, how do you want to continue to build? What are some things that are on your checklist, so to speak, of how you want to build from where you are now to where you want to be?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it's taking it one day at a time. So right now, like I just finished my sophomore year, so I have 2 years left till I graduate. So the next 2 years, I'm trying to be the best manager I can be for this program. And then, that following step would be, okay, just trying to take, that opportunity. How am I preparing myself right now to take that opportunity to be an intern after I graduate, or a graduate assistant, or a volunteer? Like I'm ready, whatever opportunity that I'm going to get, I'm going to try to, take that best one. So me trying to build, I guess, myself is just trying to be focused on my manager duties. So, right now we don't really have any internal responsibilities. So this is a great time for me to grow and build right now in different projects that, maybe I can't do in the heat of the season, during, when we are, having 5 road games in a row, or, 3 home games. So right now, I've been doing a lot of Zoom sessions. And so my idea, I feel like I'm a connector. Like I really enjoy connecting people together. So, my idea behind the Zoom sessions where I'm going to get a chance to learn, but then, 5 other people are going to get to learn also. And so I'm trying to create this platform for coaches, like yourself, and then also coaches, aspiring coaches like me and Konner, to share their story, because I feel like that adds so much value. Like we're talking about, how are we adding value? So just like sitting down, during this quarantine, speaking with people one-on-one, making those relationships. Konner attested, at first he was trying to network the wrong way, trying to meet all these people, very surface level. So for me, in growing in who I want to become, who I want to be, I'm trying to have, very in-depth relationships. Maybe I only have 5 deep relationships, but that's better than 20 surface level relationships. So for me, that's a really big thing, if that answered the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what you're doing there is right. Like, in the longer you get in this, the more you feel and you understand those surface relationships. Like, oh, I know that person, and and you reach out to them, and you may or may not hear back from them. So, and those things sometimes slap you in the face real quick. Like, hey, okay, I thought I had a deeper relationship with that person, but clearly you don't. But that depth of relationship is very important. So when you are going on to the next thing, you have, you have some people that you can go to that can give you advice, maybe give you a hand getting that next thing or whatever it is. So that's really important. Konner, what are you kind of checking off your list?
So to kind of connect back to, what Ashton just said with like the I kind of learned the wrong way. Granted, that was in accounting and in business, but like, it's really funny because I actually ended up like not meeting the requirements for my scholarship at Nebraska, like my academic scholarship. But I, like, in hindsight, like, I'm glad it happened, because like if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have transferred. And so like, otherwise I would have continued, pursuing that path of like trying to network the wrong way. And so like that really, when I went to USD, it was like that following summer after my second year of school, I actually went to the Jay Bilas Skills Camp. And when you talk about, adding value, that was like a lesson that, from Paul Binacardi, Jay Bilas, Alan Stein, it was just like ingrained in me. And so like, it was like learning from that, when I wasn't doing it the right way, to now like refocusing on adding value and doing it the right way. I think that was really impactful, and something that, it reminded me of. I mean, even this year, like, I probably could have been a better assistant coach. And so now it's like, okay, like, I'm looking at, where were my strengths? Where were my weaknesses? What do I need to do to get better? And, I know that, I'm probably not the only one in that boat. And so what I always kind of do is like, I'm similar to Ashton, where I'm a connector. I love talking to people. I love doing these things. And in a way, I kind of, it might be a little selfish, but it's like, I always try to like do things that I want to do, but also provide value to other people. So it's like selfish and selfless in a way. And so like, I reflect a lot on like, like being a better leader and different things like that. So, I've just talking and connecting with other people that have more experience than me and different things like that. And then I read a lot. And so now it's like, okay, like starting, like I started the book club, Zoom book clubs and just doing that, because then it's like, I'm reading, but like selfishly, I want other people to talk about the books with, and how we grow together. Well, other people are wanting to read too. And then, so it's like, it's because of this, need that I want, that I'm trying to create it where it's benefiting everybody. And it's just like, I'm going to make mistakes. I'm not going to be the absolute best, but it's like, taking the time to reflect and kind of, building off of my experience from a student manager to an assistant coach, and then really like trying to figure out like, okay, where are the areas that I need to, because I'm not with the staff right now. So I don't have, a lot of things pulling at me in different directions. So like taking this time to be at peace with like, hey, yeah, I'm not a part of a program, but how do I get better? So, my next job, I can be better, if that makes sense.
Well, it's great hearing your stories, both of you. It allows me to kind of go back and reminisce on how I got my foot in the door and how I got into the game. And it's very similar. I can pull a little bit out of each of your stories. So, speaking from my personal story, you guys are on the right track. You guys are doing what you need to do. Thinking back to when I started out young, and I'm going to finish this with a question, so bear with me. But I had in my mind what my next 5 years were going to look like. I thought I had it all figured out. And as the saying goes, you want a good laugh, tell God your plan. And it gets you get humbled a little bit when you're trying to break in, when you're trying to, network and look for opportunities. So for me, I had one job that it was always going to circle back. I wanted to become the head coach at the University of Hawaii. And, I had a timeline with it. I had everything planned. It wasn't until the second time I didn't get the job that I had to kind of reevaluate what I was doing. Yes, it was discouraging, but it wasn't the end all be all. It actually made me a better coach now. And this was back in, I believe, 2012 was when I didn't get the job the second time around. I've been a finalist twice. But that propelled me into being the best version of myself, being where my feet are at. And then now opportunities have just kind of presented themselves in front of me just by, being present and kind of being the best that I could be. So I was willing to adjust. And that's the one thing I would tell aspiring young coaches is be ready to adjust. The journey is not going to be a smooth sailing journey. There are going to be detours. There are going to be setbacks. There are going to be obstacles. And it's up to that individual to you got to be able to push forward if that's what you want to do. Or you can kind of detour off and find, a new career opportunity. But my question for you guys, Konner and Ashton, both are, as you guys are breaking in, what is the end goal for you? Or what is, the driving force? What do you feel like in a perfect world, or your dream job, or something along those lines that you are working towards? Go ahead, Ashton.
All right. Great question. I'm just trying to sit on my answer. I think that for me, like my driving force is that I feel like this is my purpose. Like, you talked about how when you want a great laugh, tell God your plan. But I feel that, my plan was I was going to be the best college player ever. Like I got a scholarship out of high school. I was going to grind. I was going to work hard. I was going to be great, And then I got injured and got redshirted. And it was like, okay, maybe this isn't what God has for me, And I think that that's what propelled me was knowing that, okay, let's actually sit and let's talk with God and let's understand your purpose. And so I find so much joy in camp coaching and I find so much joy every day in being a manager that I feel like I'm finally aligned with my purpose in life is going to trying to be a coach. So I think for me, that's really my driving force. And also I think my dream job is I just want to, coach one day. I don't know what level that is. I don't know what school that is. But I think for me, a few factors would be working with a staff that, aligns with my passion. Are they great people to work with? Is that a great environment? And so I feel like that's a huge thing. So I'm still pretty young. I'm 21. I feel like I'm a long, long way from getting a coaching job. So I feel like my driving force is just knowing that I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I feel like every day, I feel like I'm finding joy in this student manager role, and I'm finding joy in talking with other coaches and knowing that I'm really passionate about this, really energetic about this. I don't get burnt out from talking about basketball. And I also just think, summarizing everything, basketball, it's the game, but I feel like it's a platform to reach other people. I don't remember the coach, it was a few weeks ago, and she said we have our players for 4 years, but it's what are we doing that's going to impact them for 40 years? Eventually the ball is going to stop for everybody. So I think that basketball for me is a platform to reach other people, to help them find their passion in life, because I feel like I've found mine, and that's where you found the most joy.
I'm gonna I'll probably just say what like 95% of every aspiring coach says. Like, like I think like in my head, being at SDSU at the Division I level, I always just, I want to be a Division I head coach someday. And then that's, understanding I have a long way to go to close that gap, but that's always kind of been, I wouldn't say it's my driving force. I would say it's more of like, what I see myself doing. I guess for me, like with coaching, I get energy off of, being around people. I love connecting with people, and, people that are, motivated by relationships. You tend to find careers that have to deal with a lot of relationships. And so I think coaching really any sport makes a lot of sense, because you get to have a ton of impact. And what I like about coaching is that it, I look at it in like different levels of impact that you can have. So if you're a coach, and if I'm this, Division I head coach or whatever, you have your, your level of impacting the players. Then you have another level of impacting your staff. Then you have the level of impact with your administrators, the level of impact with your community on campus, and then your, the town or city that you're in. And then, I just like, it's so moving when, the stories of like the Tyler Trent, I think it was 2 years ago with Purdue football. It's like, that's one sport, that's one team, but it impacted a ton of people in the nation. And so I think like being able to find a career that aligns so much with relationships, development, and impact, it's not just about the players or your staff, but it's the opportunity, because sports are, everybody loves sports and they draw so much attention. Like, you can really use this to really reach a ton of different levels with people all over. And that's what I think, really motivates me. And I think like with my experience as a student manager, what I really like about it is I like to say I was spoiled, because at Nebraska, we won the Big Ten tournament. The women's team at SDSU won 3 out of 4 Summit League tournaments. And then the men's team won 1 regular season championship and 1 conference tournament when I was with them. So like, I got to be a part of a lot of winning teams. So like, as I moved forward, I got to like say like, that's why I went and took I went down a level, so to say, to go to Queens, because it's like, I've experienced, the highs of going to a Sweet 16 at the Division I level. I didn't have to chase like, ooh, I just want to win championships. And it's like, that's why I'm glad that I had those experiences, because now, when I have a little more, maybe a bigger role or, bigger ability to impact people, that's not where my focus is. It's on the relationships and developing people.
That's great. I think that's a great perspective, and I think it's shared by so many coaches. My question is this, and it's different for both of you. Ashton, I think you're one. First of all, you're both are connectors, and I think that is the thing that elongates careers, is when you are a connector, because you're constantly giving yourself to connect the people that should be together, right? And having the selfless awareness to do so is huge. But Ashton, and I'll speak personally, I think you're doing an amazing job connecting people this off season. And so my question to you is, where did you get the idea, and how do you think it's going? Like, what's been the feedback from people?
Yeah, for sure. I think that first off, like, it's been very beneficial from just feedback from other coaches, other managers that have been involved, other people, but kind of the idea behind it. So before quarantine, I had like a blog, it's called In the Paint with Pilz, and then I have a podcast that's called Golden Nuggets for Aspiring Coaches. And so before the quarantine, I was using those assets and like those tools to really help other coaches get connected with the people that I was interviewing. So, part of my story is the last 3 summers I've worked camps. Well, for those that have worked camps, no, you don't make money from camp. Usually you spend money to go get yourself to that camp. So for me, I was living paycheck to paycheck going to all these camps. Not everybody has the means or the funds or the ability to do that. So for me, it was like, okay, I get a chance to speak to these coaches that are incredible, but how can I get them in front of other people that just cannot, don't have the opportunity to do what I'm doing? So for me, it was like, okay, I'm going to create this platform where other people can listen. So hence the podcast. And then before that, I was writing about my experiences on the blog and letting people, read them. So for me, it's always been, okay, if I can go to this clinic, I think that I can give other people, like, share the information that I'm learning, and that's not going to affect me. I feel like knowledge, like when we say knowledge is power, I feel like we should share the game more with people, and that's kind of my take from it. So going into this quarantine, the first week I didn't really do anything. I was just at home. I was sad. We had just left the Big 12 tournament, didn't get a chance. We had a great season. It was getting really exciting for us. Being a Jayhawk is incredible. And so I was, what can I do? We were on spring break. I started seeing some of the virtual clinics where the speaker, like, you could see the speaker, but then you couldn't see the people that were, like, watching and tuning in. So I watched some of those. And then I was like, what if we start doing something for, young coaches? So I have a lot of friends like Konner, another girl named Shannon, another girl named Garrett, and they're all looking for GA spots. So I was like, how can we find a platform where other people could connect about what they're going through, maybe get some GAs that are already done, how did they get that opportunity? So that was kind of my goal, is connecting people again, like we're talking about. And so I started with a young coaches Zoom where we had 3 GAs speak. And then I was like, okay, let's get into, director of ops. Did a director of ops panel, then did one with you and Shimmy and Shelly about assistant coaches on the women's side. Then I did like a head coaches panel on the men's side. And so I think for me, it's the same thing I was doing with the podcast and the blog, is trying to connect people and give people a chance to get in front of these coaches to learn, because I think that's so important. And I guess not selfish, it's just me wanting other people to get that chance. So that's kind of been my driving force behind it. So I think they've been going well. This past 5 days I've been in Colorado hiking. I kind of have a sunburn that looks like Harry Potter right here. And so I kind of took that work-life balance. Break this week. And that was kind of hard because I feel like I could be doing so much for people right now. So that's just kind of been my driving force behind what's been going on.
That's great. And I know we're going to come back to what you just said. And Konner, I think, I first got, I guess, I noticed you first was last year, when you put it out on Twitter and trying to make it down to the Final Four. And so where did you come up with that idea in terms of just like using social media to, like, I mean, you can call it networking, but like just to tell your story a little bit?
Yeah. So like, really, I think I was listening to a lot of the Gary V podcast, and he talks a lot about, like, document, don't create. And so, like, it was probably after my first year at SDSU, I deleted all my social media, and, I just viewed Twitter as LinkedIn. Because, I mean, obviously basketball coaches aren't really on LinkedIn all that much. And so Twitter is like the LinkedIn to the basketball world. So I'm just like, okay, these are professional tools to allow me to, connect with people. And this notion of Gary V, he talks about, like, you don't have to, like, create anything or do this or that, like, just show what you're doing. And then so I kind of used it as a way to keep myself accountable. Like I was, as a manager, you don't necessarily have, it's not like I'm recruiting or sitting in with the head coach talking about game strategy. I have, like, kind of a more limited role. So I'm like, okay, if I know I want to be a head coach someday, like, what are I read James Clear's Atomic Habits book, and I'm like, what are the things that I can be doing right now, the habits that I can do right now, where in, however many years when I become a head coach, it's going to help me get there. And so, I started reading, and then it was like with connecting, I used to view, Ashton talked a little bit about it, like sharing information. I used to go to clinics and I'd take notes, and then someone would be like, hey, can I get your notes? And I'm thinking like, man, like these are my competitive advantage. Get your own notes. Like I'm not sharing this. And then I realized like, you know, it's the execution and the application of the knowledge that is the separator. So I started sharing everything, because then that was a way to, you know, meet and connect with people. And so I used that as a like kind of like a cycle of keeping me doing stuff. Like, you know, for me to share a quote or whatever, it's like, it's because I'm listening to this podcast and I really like this piece, so I tweet about it, and then other people liked it, or just asking good questions, because like I've been able to connect with so many people from so many places where I never would have met them had it not been for something like Twitter and social media. And so I just tried to soak it all in and learn from as many different perspectives as possible. And then I think just by doing that, like, you know, by asking good questions, people would reply. Then other people are following me because they want to see the replies to these things. And it's almost turning it into like a resource center in a sense. And I think just like showing what I was doing, it was my way of like, you know, I think there's you know, there's that line you have to be careful of, like, hey, everybody, look at me, I'm amazing. Like, this is what I'm doing. And then like more just showing like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Like, so people can see it, because I think now, I mean, coaches say it all the time, that like they never look at the resume, or the resume is like just a formal thing for HR. And so the way I view it is like, well, Twitter's my resume, or social media is my resume that everybody sees all the time. So it's like, I want to show what I'm doing on there so people know, you know, what I'm about and things like that.
Well, I think that's awesome, because I mean, I think the two things that I love what Gary Vee, you know, preaches is the fact that like, you're not putting things out there to just get likes. You're putting things out there to add value, you know, to those people out there that's following you. They're following you for a reason. So add value to their lives. Right. And then the other thing is just, you know, how do you build the brand? And you build the brand by just being consistent and constant, so that people understand, you know, what you're doing. So I think that's, I mean, it's a good mentor to have, right? Virtually, you're able to get on one of his shows and calls. But hey, we're going to take a break right now. Stick with us, and we will be back.
Love to welcome everybody back, and our perspective this week from the bench. We have two aspiring coaches here that have already given us their story, and you know, that's a big part of what we do here on the show. A couple things that really resonated with me that you were both sharing was just some of the work you've been doing on your craft and getting better at the craft of coaching. And I know as you guys want to kind of dig in with us and use us as a resource here, and before we go, just kind of a couple things. You know, you've talked a lot about some of the work you're doing, and some things that I would challenge everyone in your position is, as Gavin mentioned earlier, is being grounded in where you're at. You know, Ashton, you mentioned some of the things of your role as a manager. Like, what kind of programming can you do right now that's going to make your job more efficient? No one's going to see that. That's not something that's going to go on social media. It's only going to be about, how can I make the job that I am doing currently at Kansas be more efficient? And we've talked about that in the past, how this time has really been important for us to become that in our craft, in where we're at in our careers. So I would really, really challenge aspiring coaches in whatever role that is to say, hey, look, I need to come up with a more efficient way of doing the job that is given to me right now, you know. And so I would certainly share that little tidbit from kind of the points that we've all brought up a little bit. So Ashton, why don't you go ahead and lead us off, and then Tony will take your question, and Gav follow up, and then we'll just kind of go back around the horn, and then we'll just take this segment in that aspect. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great. I totally agree with what you just said. I think that the challenge, I told Coach Rosario this a few weeks ago, my friend Dylan Mitchell told me, was not what we're doing now, but what are we doing now that we're going to do in 6 months when quarantine is over. So I really love that. My question that I want to pose for you guys is, as a young coach, how did you maybe have a work-life balance, or did you not? And is that something that you learned as you grew in your profession? You know, you guys are all seasoned coaches. So just kind of talking about, you know, what is the importance of that work-life balance, and maybe even hitting on, you know, that mental health balance of like, okay, you know, when do I need to take a break, and just things like that.
It's a great question, especially for young coaches. And I would have to tell you that I was probably the worst person in the world when it came to work-life balance. You know, back when, you know, I didn't have a work cell phone until I think my second or third year coaching. So, you know, all of my recruiting calls, all the calls that you make and all that stuff were from the office. So as you can imagine, I spent a lot of long hours and long nights in the office. And if I look back on it now, there were very few times where I took time for myself to go on vacation or to do, you know, things where you just basically unplugged. So if I had to critique my initial working environment, I think probably the first 10 years of my life, I didn't spend anywhere near enough time trying to balance my work. And I think, you know, I got into it for a while and you know, kind of had some issues with mental health and had some problems where I had, you know, I have depression. So I lived with that. But it didn't really manifest itself until, you know, maybe 10 years into working, and you start to become aware of maybe some things that aren't perfect, and that you're running your body ragged, and you're over anxious. So you start to find those things. So at an early age, I would just, my advice would be to find something that relaxes you. Like later on this afternoon, I'm going to play golf. That relaxes me. Spending time on the beach, that relaxes me. Reading relaxes me. So you have to find those things that relax you, and don't be afraid to do them. Say, you know what? It's 8:00. I'm done making calls tonight. Or, you know, and set some boundaries for yourself so that you will go out and find ways to relax, unplug, find, you know, other things that challenge your mind. But it is easy to fall into that trap of, I have to get this done. I have to get this done. I need to do this, need to do this, need to do this. But you know what? You know, we coach a game for a living. You know, we're not curing cancer. We're not, you know, stopping wars from happening. We coach a game. And, you know, if we can keep our perspective on that, I think you put yourself in a lot better position to be able to take breaks and give yourself some time to decompress. What do you got, Gav?
Yeah, I think the longer I've been doing this, the more sometimes I need to remind myself of that balance. You get caught up in the grind, you get caught up in the wins and losses, trying to make the tournament. And so you do have to take a step back. And for me, it's, you know, to piggyback off what Tony says, it's when I do have my family time, that's my family time. Like I'm going to be present with them. And then I also sometimes tend to forget about me, like my health, my exercising, my eating habits, all those type of things. So I feel I've done a better job the last 2 years than I had earlier on in my career. So you definitely do need to stay in touch with that. And at the same time, you've got to be fortunate to learn from the people you work alongside and work for. I've had great bosses who've showed me what the work balance life looks like. And I understand that not everyone gets that situation to be in front of them. And I totally get it. And I've been blessed to have the opposite. Like, and maybe they've learned from their experiences. Maybe when they were coming up as assistants, they were like, well, if I get the chance to be a head coach, I'm not going to be like that. And fortunately for me, I've been able to live in that reality. I mean, my first job, we practiced in the morning, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. My head coach was out playing 9 holes of golf before he came back to the office. Like, he made that a point. And, you know, for us, it's like, okay, what do we do? And we had one coach who went surfing in Hawaii in the morning, came back, and then we put in the time. So we were taught early on how to be efficient. So I think at the end of the day, you kind of got to find what works for your situation, but never lose sight of, you know, yourself. If you don't have a family, if you get burnt out or if you get sick or unhealthy, that's going to affect your job completely. So you got to make sure that that is taken care of. And then if you do have a family, just make sure you do be present when that time is available for you.
Konner, before you ask your question, I just want to touch on just I want a different perspective on that question. I think, when you do get, the work-life balance, where my mind goes is, what am I as a coach choosing to do? Right. As opposed to, is it the environment that we are in? Because there are some staffs out there that, you are at the mercy of the head coach, right? The head coaches are creating the environment that you almost have to say yes. They haven't protected you in a way that they're saying, Ashton, Konner, what do you got going this weekend, type of thing. Now they may say, what do you have going this weekend? But they're alluding to, because I need you to do something. Right. And so automatically you are feeling the stress because of a conversation that either did not happen, or like myself, I said yes to everything. Now I was living in Louisiana and Kentucky my first 5 years. So there was nothing going on, and the smartphones weren't the smartphones like they are now, I didn't get distracted. So I did say yes to everything. Now, did it bother me? It didn't bother me, because I wanted to learn trade. I wanted to learn the nuances of running a program. We were fundraising $60,000 to an NAI program in Kentucky. So we were doing the fairs, the street fairs, all of that stuff. And we were just saying yes because we knew that was the environment we wanted to create for our kids. Now, at the same time, as a staff, I was saying yes to, hey, let's all go down to Myrtle Beach for a week and just go hang out. So I was still saying yes to those things as well. So it's not just the work, but I think early in your careers, you got to be in a position where you got to know thyself a little bit, right? What will stress you out? What kind of stress can you handle? I don't think I'll ever get burnt out of the work that we do as coaches. But what will stress me out and maybe burn me out is the emotional piece that comes with certain decisions. Now that I have a family, a wife, I'm in a different stage of my career where, the balance for me is kind of what Phil Jackson said, right? He says that there was only one difference between Kobe and Michael Jordan. Kobe would be a dog on the court, but then he'd go live his life, for his family. Whereas Jordan would try to beat you to the car and then beat you home and all that other stuff, right? So in my stage in my career now, I'm able to just shut the door of the office or get out of the car after a recruiting call and literally walk into my house and just be with my sons and my wife. So I think you got to know yourself a little bit, and every stage of your career then evolves that a little bit, right? So sorry, Konner, us coaches, right? We like to keep going.
I think kind of in terms of this conversation of the work-life balance, I think, sometimes, whether it was me or other young coaches, when you just get into it, you're not going to be making a lot of money. And so how do you find the staff that, understands those pressures, or how do you model it within your staff, or what can we do better as a coaching community where the people at the top understand the emotional piece or the stressors because I think the financial stressor will be for everybody that's younger, because the entry-level ones don't pay that well. But it's what can we be doing if we're up the chains to help support these people to have them grow in the game?
Well, I'll lead off, and Jesse, you can kind of piggyback. And I think, I can only speak from my story. When I went to McNeese State, I tried to negotiate. When I saw that number, right, the number they give you, here's what we're going to pay you. Then it's automatic, okay, how do you make that work? And then you got to think about that in 2 seconds. So I asked, can I live in the dorms? And it just ended up being I could have. I negotiated a meal in the calf per day, and I was stuffing fruit and just anything else in my pocket. Not that I would eat the fruit later, but I was just stuffing it because I was afraid that I wasn't going to eat, type of thing. And then, you go to, I went to an NAI school where I was a GA. So they were paying for my school, but then here's the stipend. Well, how can you make it work? Well, you know, it obviously cost of living is different in Kentucky than what I was used to in California. So I think, you know, part of the conversation with the head coach, when they do give you the number, you got to be able to kind of, you know, push back a little bit and ask what can you do, and where can you help, and things like that, because it is a grind early. And I went into debt. You know, people say you don't make money coaching. Well, eventually, if you're good enough, you do. And if you're smart with money, you can, right? It's more about your lifestyle than the actual dollar amount. But man, I went into debt chasing my dream. And was my family okay with that? No. But was I okay with, well, yeah, I mean, because it was like, okay, eventually I'll pay it off type of thing. And so I think there are those monetary stresses, and then obviously what can you get you through the day? And I think that's a calculation that you just got to be okay with making, and is the risk, you know, greater than the reward?
I think that's a great point. It actually reminds me of something that Yvonne Sanchez said a few weeks back on the show. You know, I think so many times that we let the monetary part infringe on our growth. And I think that mentality, and I really urge people to go back and watch what she said about that, because I think a lot of times young aspiring coaches, and even maybe people where we are, kind of get caught in the financial part and let that supersede the craft of what we do. And if you get hung up there and you're not willing to risk and roll the dice a little bit within the framework of what you know in your head that you can handle, then that becomes overriding pressure. And it's not about getting better at my craft. And to Brian's point, if you live in that space of, I am willing to take a financial risk within the framework of what I know I can handle, I'm not going to let the outside influence affect me on that, or what the perception of the path I should be taking because, I had a GA job, and then, I should be the Dobo job, and then, I should be the video coordinator, and then, I should be the third assistant. If we're trying to go that path, then we're getting caught up in titles, and we're getting caught up in the financial aspect of it. And then we are in a tough spot because now we're not working on our craft. And at the end of the day, that's where, to Brian's point, I'll hammer that home, is I was willing to take some financial risk because I was going to be so good at my craft that I knew I would be able to get that covered back. So I really encourage people, you know, and if you follow all of our stories, all of us have been, you know, around the bend and back, and it's come in so many different places because we were all so confident we were all through that process. We were improving the craft of our profession. And that is what's won the day for all of us and put us all in great situations and where we have great stories and where we really are impassioned to share that. So I really would just be willing to, and that's the question, is sit down and maybe it is, I can't be in, and I go back to what I said with Lisa, who gets that asked all the time here, our head coach, you know, she says, well, where do you want to be? Well, maybe I can't be taking a grad job in San Diego because it's not going to work. So maybe I have to go be in the heart of Texas because that's going to work, because I'm going to be able to work on my craft, but I'm going to be able to live in the dorm at that particular school, or I'm going to be able to, you know, share an apartment with the manager or the Dobo or the video coordinator from the men's staff, or whatever that looks like, you know, or the football team or the baseball. Like, that outside the box ability and perspective is what's going to serve you well. It's not ever going to look, if you know anything more about our stories, there has been no box for our group, you know? And I think that's probably why we've all been aligned for so long, is that we all helped each other through those stories, you know? So I would really encourage you to, again, we're not asking you to take out a $100,000 loan and then, you know, you're screwed. That's not what we're advising at all. But definitely being able to think outside the box, and how can we creatively, but with a forefront to be long-term, the craft and developing what's going to develop my craft, what decisions are going to help me develop that craft. So I know that that's worked for all of us, and it is hard, and it's nerve-wracking, and all of us have shared stories about that time and where we thought, you know, Gav mentions earlier, is like, you know, I had this 5-year plan, thought I'd be there, and then, oh my gosh, boom, it doesn't work like that, you know? And I think both of you are aware of that. I just hearing you talk, I think you realize that, but it's sometimes hard to sit where you're sitting and go, do I sound like a lunatic? You know, like I've shared in the past, like it took my family a decade before they really thought that this was actually something that I was sustainable for my life, you know? And so, you have to just be willing to live in and lean in on the good work that you both have already done and on that track record. So Ashton, I'll throw it to you for your next one, and let Tony and Gav kind of follow up with that on for you.
Yeah, I think just kind of summing everything that we talked about, for me, as a young aspiring coach, I'm still figuring out how to decipher between, you know, who's a great mentor to have, who do I take advice from. So maybe my question would be, you know, once you get into that coaching role, as a young coach, when challenges arise within your program or maybe in your personal life, who do you go to for advice? You know, you don't want to share all your problems with everybody, but maybe how you decipher between, okay, this is a person I confide in, and just kind of that, if that makes sense.
Honestly, for me, a lot of that is, you know, I talked about earlier, your inner circle. You know, a lot of it are these guys. You know, some family, you know, there's one or two family members that I'll also touch base with and stuff, but I think it's really important that you're going to get people that are going to be honest with you. I think it's really easy to have friends around that are going to tell you, you know, they agree with you on everything. You know, and I think part of that, you know, when I said earlier, I was a bad person to follow for, you know, work-life balance. I think my biggest thing was I wanted to learn everything and anything I could. So I was willing to work 20 hours a day to do that. You know, I don't know if I wouldn't recommend that for everyone, but for me, that's what worked. And got me started and got my mind going. You know, Konner, I can, you know, attest with you. I also read a lot of books. So I really try to put as much information in my dome as I can, and then try to pull out what makes sense and what works. And I like to try to spend time thinking critically about it. I think that's one of the best things you can do, is ask questions and try to take the information that you're getting and think critically about it. I know that I can call Brian and he's going to give me maybe a point of view that I hadn't thought of. And I'm going to call another one of my friends and they're going to give me a point of view that another point of view that I haven't thought of. But I think the biggest picture on that is when you're making your decision, you have to weigh, what are all these people telling me? What am I seeing for myself and hearing for myself and feeling? And then now, how do I think critically about all of that to come up with the plan that makes the most sense? And everyone is going to be a little different, right? You personally, like maybe a little more of an emotional side, or you're more the analytical side, or, you know, it's good to get a point of view from kind of every different perspective. And now as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at being able to do that. I think one of the things that helps me and what has helped me is that understanding my illness has helped me get to know and understand other people better. And one of the techniques that I've learned is that using reflective listening, where you let someone speak to you and you really concentrate hard on what they're saying, and then repeat back to them, kind of like in your own words, what you heard them say, to find out, to make sure it's exactly what you think it is. So I think that process has allowed me to slow down and really analyze and be more critical in my thought process and my feeling evaluation to make better, more precise and more informed decisions about whatever it is that's coming up, you know, whether it's a personal issue or an issue with a player or with the coach or, you know, anything. I think it's huge to have your circle that you're very close with, but make sure that they're, you know, I always like to try to have people that are smarter than me, you know, that are going to be able to come up with ways of putting things or challenging me to think about things in a different way. So I think when you really, and I think it goes back to a little bit what B-Row said about being self-aware. You know, I've said this for a long time to my players that two things can get you through life if you do them very well. And that's being self-aware, being aware of, you know, who you are, how you present yourself, how people see you, so you know how you are. And then two, paying attention to the reactions you get from people, paying attention to what people tell you, really paying attention so you're pulling that information in, and being aware that, you know, how to process it. those two things can really help you go a long way. And so I guess from my point of view, and from, I hope that answers your question, that you just really try to be present with the people that are there, and when you're having conversations, and really try to learn everything you can so that you can put forth a really deep critical thought in every decision that you make.
Yeah, for me, when I broke in and started at the University of Hawaii, my mentors were the people I worked with. They had been doing it for 16 to 17 years already. So I just try to latch on where I was at. And that slowly kind of put me out there when we went to go recruiting in July, when we went to the Final Four. Then I was drawn to the people that somewhat were similar to me, had the same type of aspirations, same kind of type of connectedness. Like Tony and I knew him because he was on the opposing bench. So we had no relationship other than he coached at NAU and I was at Idaho State. But from that, we would see each other out on the road, and then you kind of get drawn to each other. Same thing with Brian. I met Brian out on the road recruiting. Same thing with Jesse when he was at St. Mary's. So you kind of get drawn to those people, and then you get to catch up with them, and your circle grows the longer you're in it. I still remember when Tony was at UCLA, my wife and he got us tickets literally right behind the bench. And I was like in every huddle, just like taking mental notes, mental snapshots. Like that was my professional development, because my buddy is coaching, the number 3 seed UCLA playing at Gonzaga. Like that was awesome. I still have pictures. I'll never forget about that. But those are type of his platform, his experience. I can pick his brain. And especially now I'm in the Pac-12, I can pick his brain about the challenges he went through at UCLA, whether it was recruiting, playing, scouting reports, all these type of things. So I feel as you guys kind of continue to go to Final Fours, when you get the chance to go recruiting, it is kind of be observing, see who kind of has that professionalism, people maybe you hold in a higher regard, and then try to get to know them. I have a few people that I've coached with that I remain in contact with 100%. And then there are some people that I've never coached with, but I have kind of like, I can give them a call and just pick their brain because I respect them. I really I love what they do and how they go about doing it. And I'd love to attach my name to kind of some of their success, and anything I can pull from them only helps me and makes, me and the staff I'm with better.
Go ahead, Konner.
Awesome. I'm gonna try to connect some pieces here. So, Brian, you talked about self-awareness. Tony, I really liked how you talked about reflective listening. Now, I think those two things, like to build on those, like you need experience. And so, and then to connect Jesse's point of, kind of taking the risk of, something where you're not going to make a lot of money or something like that. I guess from your guys' perspective now, what can young coaches be doing where like they're still kind of trying to, become really good at being self-aware or reflective listening when someone's talking to them? How can they navigate this in terms of finding out, like, is this the best opportunity for me to work on my craft, with this coaching staff, with this head coach, with, whatever that may be? How do you kind of navigate that line when you may not, it's not like you're fully unaware, but like when you're still growing with your experience, because that stuff is developed over time?
So 3 things. 1, you don't fully know. That's the chance, right? Like just think about recruiting. Everyone puts on their perfect self. And when you're being interviewed, you have to have a pulse of what those non-negotiables are for you working with that staff, but you don't really know what it'll be like until you're in the trenches, right? Julie Wolhoit, who was the head coach at LMU when I was there, she said, the one reason why I hired you was because I felt like I could have a beer with you. Like, that's what it was. And I think our relationship was just that. Like, we were able to just talk that way and open up and challenge each other in a certain way, because that was the premise, right? And I think early in your career, I kind of stated this, sometimes you just have to say yes to those, just to forge your way into the business, but then you got to fight to stay in it. I was the Californian on staff at Cumberland. And, just, it's a different culture. It's just a different way of life. It's just a different everything. And yet I wasn't going to sacrifice me not connecting with someone on staff just because. Like, I almost made those relationships happen for us to be successful, so that we can recruit the kids we needed to recruit, attract the players we needed to attract, and then create the environment that we needed to create, so that we have this long-lasting alumni that cared about us as much as we cared about them. So I don't think, early in your career, you do know, but later on in your career, you just know certain, you do. So strictly speaking, D1, there's 350 teams times 4, right? 1,500 coaches. And if you do it over time, you get to know the good, the bad, and the ugly with most of those coaches. And so that is your pulse, is kind of like what they've done. How are they? How do they make decisions? Because what you don't want someone else's sins to cause your career and your trajectory to change in a negative way. And so you always have to have a pulse. You always have to really have a relationship with the people on staff, some knowing what to do, but others what not to do. And you got to have an idea of when you have to perhaps leave if it's a negative environment. Like, there's no sense of staying in something that you're not happy going to work, but at the same time, you got to be able to prepare yourself for the change. I often talk, and this is the last point that I want to make, is you got to be willing to reinvent yourself, whether you're fired or whether you move. If you can't reinvent yourself, then you're, one, not adding value to yourself, but you're not adding value to where you're heading. But at the same time, being able to reinvent is a form of being educated, having a pulse, and being able to adapt to what's next and what you want to achieve in the next spot.
And I'll just add a kind of a last note there, and before we go to break, but it's just, I really think, and I'm probably all of us could share a couple different stories we've been at different Final Fours, and different aspiring coaches would come up and have a chat because they know we're at XYZ school or what have you. And I know for me, the one thing that is always concerning when I'm having a chat is when I'm in this one-on-one conversation and they're constantly looking over my shoulder to see which next big coach is going to walk into the room. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I would really caution and advise that to what every one of us has sort of said, and we've all said it different ways, but to be incredibly, and that goes back to that point, and Konner, you re-mentioned it, was Tony's point about listening intently to what's being said to you in that moment, because that's you're helping identify what that person is about. That's helping identify what that staff is about. And not those next things, those next conversations. If you're worried about that next conversation you're having over social media, or that next conversation you're having in a Final Four or what have you, you've probably missed out on the one that was there. And that might have been the one that was the most important one you ever had. And I think that's probably why our group has been so tight, is that we were all coming up. We were all sitting where both of you were sitting, and we believed in what the person was saying in front of us as something that had in tremendous value. Now, did we take that as that? Yeah, we agreed with that. Not always, but we always gave that person that was literally in that moment, whether it's a 5-minute conversation or an hour conversation, that you really have to sink down into that. And yes, we're doing all this branding and promoting and all those kind of things, but I really, really encourage every one of you through these times where you're in these moments of learning and time, is really to not make it be about, oh, I talked to so-and-so. It's, I really had a conversation with so-and-so. So with that, we'll take a break, and Brian, I'll throw it back to you to send us that way.
Yeah. So Ashton, Konner, obviously we appreciate you being on. If there's two things that hopefully you take away from all of this is, one, you got to just keep believing in yourself. Keep believing in your instincts. Because those instincts never lie, right? We often underthink or overthink, but those instincts are true. So be true to them. You can count on us four to be there with you, right? Like, and I think that's the challenge for you all. Ashton, keep having these connecting Zooms as long as you can, because I think they're vital. I think they add value. Konner, stay headstrong, keep your head above water in the sense of knowing that something will happen so long that you continue, whether it's what we've said or Gary Vee, but keep that constant going, because that is going to be your lifeline through the tough times. Okay. And I'll just end with this. Julie at LMU wasn't retained. Lynn did not get the job. So we were all essentially fired, right? There are people in this community that won't give a shit about you because you're no longer wearing a certain name. Don't be those people. Don't promote those people. Challenge them so much that all of a sudden when you do get a name on your chest, now you're hearing from them, that is your pulse. It's a dog eat dog in any industry, specifically this one, because no matter what position you have, someone's coming after it. So that's why you do want to work diligently. That's why you want to have a close circle and always trust that those people will tell you the truth that you need. Okay. So keep growing. We loved having you. And we'll be back.
Welcome back to From the Bench. We want to thank Konner Beste and Ashton Pilz for being on the show today. Great insight from those folks that we, all of us coaches, as we build in the profession and we maybe get our own head job one day, these are the types of young people that we want to be bringing into our staff. So great insight by them, and really enjoyable day from the bench.
Yes, and I just would like to say, the driving force behind this platform is to connect some of the older generation with the younger aspiring young coaches, and just connecting and help understanding. Each has different perspective. Each might have different opinions and whatnot, but we're all still in the relationship business. We are all, helping out the younger generation with our student athletes. So we all do have the same end results. And so there's nothing wrong with sharing and closing the gap in a way where the communication gets better. Our stories, our life lessons that we've gone through and lived through can be shared and learned from the younger generation. And I'm loving the fact that we have this platform. It's something that is very true to me, because growing up in Hawaii, I didn't have this. I was stuck on an island. So this is amazing, and I hope that a lot of people tuning in every week can take one or two things, because I know I am every week jotting down things and continuing to learn. So that's it from the bench. Thank you guys for listening, and until next week, have a good one.